What's up, guys? It's Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be talking about 3 tips for quarterbacks to increase their arm strength. So we're going to be talking about the upper body mechanics of a throw, the lower body mechanics of the throw, and how your footwork can tie into arm strength specifically to set you up to be in a good position to make this throw downfield. So this video will help you guys add a little bit of distance to your deep ball, get more velocity over the middle, and all the above. So I hope this helps you out. Hope you can learn some new things about throwing mechanics that you can apply to your own game. But also, fellas, if you guys want a 4-week-long schedule with all the specific exercises that quarterbacks need to do to actually improve their arm strength and improve on these aspects that we're going to be covering today, check out that very first link in the description for our QB arm strength bundle. So what it is a 4-week gym training program with all the exercises quarterback needs to do to build that leg strength, that core strength, that shoulder mobility, that upper half mobility, to tie into arm strength and getting more velocity on the throw. And you'd get access to our arm strength manual. So we break down all the mechanics for you in a set booklet that tie into arm strength. So I hope you guys could check that out. Very first link in the description. Let's get started. So first thing we're going to be talking about is this front arm, and this is one of the main keys that all quarterbacks in the NFL have. So let's look at this story for Patrick Mahomes. I want you to see how just non-existent that front arm is in the throw, how much it doesn't apply, how he's able to stay square. So obviously everybody knows that the throw comes from your hips. We've talked about this before, and the weight transfer from your lower half. I know you guys can't see his lower half. We're going to be talking about the lower half and how that ties in the next clip. We're going to be taking a look at a clip from Baker Mayfield. But this first clip right here, this front hand is everything, because as a quarterback, you're very rotational, right? So you're either going to rotate from your shoulders or you're going to rotate from your hips. It's going to be one of the two, right? So because that's just how the ball works. That's how the ball comes off your hand, because you have a rotator cuff, and that's how the rotator cuff applies. So it's either going to be from your hips, external rotation, or your shoulders, where you pull your front elbow down, you pull your shoulders down. So you see how Mahomes, when he gets to this spot right here, he stays with that front hand by his face, almost like he's eating a sandwich, and that front elbow doesn't come down to his hip. This is the position to give us what we call torque. Now, what is torque? Torque is when you separate your upper half from your lower half. So when you go to throw here, I know we can't see his lower half, but you see how when he takes that ball back, Mahomes has that front shoulder on the target, right? So right about at this point in the throw, his front foot's coming down, and he's starting to transfer weight. And that weight transfer, we're going to talk about that in the next clip, like I said, but that weight transfer is letting his hips rotate through. And you can notice how that front hip rotates through. Now, when your front hip is rotating through, if you keep swinging your front shoulder to where it ends up like replacing your right shoulder, to where you swing it all the way around your frame, you're not going to have any torque. But when you're able to have the hips rotate through, that back hip comes through before the ball, and you leave that front side by your frame, and you see how he stays square at the release point, his hips and his shoulders are square to the throw, that gives you that coil. You probably hear quarterback coaches or quarterback analysts, whoever, talk about it all the time, like, oh, he's got a twitchy motion. He's got that whip, right? So you hear that phrase thrown out a lot. A lot of guys in the Elite 11, if you guys are familiar with that, they talk about, oh, he's very twitchy. He's a twitchy guy. You hear Dilfer say that all the time. This right here is how you get twitchy. You don't let this front side swing way open when your hips go. If you guys can keep that front hand somewhere by your face, it'll help your release point, because one, your body's split down a midline. So if you were to pull that elbow down or lean out of it with your head, your release would be affected, because your body's split down midline. Whatever your front side's going to do, your right side's going to do. But also, it helps with torque. That rotation right here, that hip rotation, and you keeping this hand nice and tight to your frame, not swinging the elbow down, gives you that like bow and arrow effect, right? Where there's a snap to the throw. It's like you're cracking a whip at the top of this thing. So that's the first tip to increase that arm strength, is make sure that you don't swing your front side out of there. Make sure that on the throw, you're not swinging that elbow down to your hip. You're not letting your front hand swing way open, and you're not letting this front shoulder replace where your right shoulder was. It's a very old school way of doing things. A lot of old school coaches will say, okay, your right shoulder is pointed over here. You want to get your left shoulder all the way around and replace where your right shoulder was. That's not how you get torque. That's not how you get a snappy motion. That's how you end up throwing sidearm, and you actually lose arm strength, because you're not dissociating your upper half and your lower half, which is just a fancy term for saying separating your upper half and your lower half. Your lower half makes the throw. Your front side gives you accuracy, but also it gives you that whip to the motion. Let's watch the thing again, full speed, one more time. Great example here from Mahomes of how to keep that front arm nice and tight and letting the lower half do the work, okay? So now, let's talk about this story from Mayfield. So Mayfield shows a great example of what we need for my lower half. Now, I would say his base might be a touch wide here, but obviously this guy's got a ton of velocity on the ball, right? So like I would say this is the spot that we want to be in right here. So how we're able to get power on the ball, the second tip to increase velocity on your throws and to increase your arm strength is you got to make sure that this back foot is underneath your frame. So what do I mean by that? I mean that your back foot is not out here, because everybody loves to talk about, oh, he has a good base. You want to have a wide base. And that's true. You do want to have a wide base. You don't want to have your feet super close together like a lot of people that I see teach. This front foot is good. That back foot's where we need to be. Is back foot's underneath this frame because that allows you to get your hips through, and that's what we're going to mainly be focused on because that's what gives you velocity on the throw. But your front foot still remains kind of wide, and that's fine because you want your front foot to be light and you want about 75% of your weight on this back leg. Okay, now a lot of people say, oh, you want to be 60-40. Now the problem with that is when you're 60-40, you've already transferred 40% of that weight. So I feel like if you're already 40% on your front leg, you're not going to have the best transfer going forward. I really want to overemphasize it. I really want to almost think of it like you want to get this back knee over your toe, because trust me, that transfer to where you get this weight on your back leg to that front leg is what allows your front hip to open up. So let's talk about it. So you see how Mayfield, he does a great job of reassessing himself. Back leg's under his frame, like I said, because that'll help you get your knee through, which also means your back hip's going to come through, which also means that your front hip will rotate through. And if you combine that with what we were just talking about, that front hand staying nice and tight to your frame where the hips rotate you through, that's going to give you more torque on the ball, and that gives you more velocity and more arm strength. So you see how when he's here, he's transferring that weight. That weight is going through. It's not a push. He's not pushing like a pitcher. It's a shift. You want to shift that weight from your back leg to your front leg. You want to get that front stride down, and you want to be getting that weight to the outside part of your leg like he does. Because now you see how his front hip is starting to open up, right? Because that back foot's underneath his frame. That knee's able to drive through. The front hip's able to rotate through. And you can kind of see how when we get to this spot, his back hip is going through before the football. That's where we want to be with my lower half. That's where I have to transfer with my lower half. That's how I want my hips to make this rotation, because now Mayfield does kind of swing that front elbow a little bit wider, but you see how he ultimately stays square. That left shoulder doesn't end up where his right shoulder was. He's staying square to this throw. He's not replacing. He's not rotating and replacing, because that upper half going through gives him that snap to the throw. This right here, that snap where he's coming down, comes from you transferring your weight, letting your hips rotate through, and you staying disciplined with that front arm like we were just talking about. So the second tip to increase that arm strength is make sure that that back leg's under your frame so you could transfer that weight. Now let's talk about what would happen if he was too wide. Now, if he was in this situation, like let's say his back foot was out here, you were capped out. You physically cannot have more weight than like what you already have on that back leg because your back foot's too wide. So what's going to end up happening is you're going to get super heavy with your front foot, so you're not going to be able to transfer weight, and your back leg is going to trail way behind. You guys have probably seen it all the time where guys throw and their back foot swings way behind them. That's because they have too much weight on their front leg. So if you guys could close down that back leg, get that back leg underneath your frame, and if you're a guy who struggles with that, like you feel like you like to pull that front elbow down, you like to lean out of the throw, try closing down your back foot, because when you close down your back foot, it makes it a lot easier for your hips to rotate down that axis. The ball just trails right behind, and that gives you more torque, and that gives you more power. So if you're a guy who struggles, this is the main thing that I see the most benefit with my quarterbacks. If you're a guy who struggles to get velocity on the ball, try to get more weight on your back leg and close your back leg down. Really focus on transferring your weight through. And if you could stay disciplined with your upper half, like we were talking about, like you close that shoulder, like you see how Mayfield, when he gets that front foot down, that front shoulder's closed. He's not pulling open. He's not spread eagle at that 90-degree angle. His front foot's getting down. The weight transfer starts the throw. And while he's transferring weight, that front side's closed, so he could have that torque, he could have that snappiness, and the hips go through before the ball goes through. That's the second tip to get more velocity on your throw. Make sure that back leg is underneath that frame. Let's watch the throw again, full speed. Great job by Mayfield letting those hips rotate through, staying square on the release to get that snappiness to the ball and that twitchiness to the throw. So now we're going to be looking at this story from Wilson. Again, we're going to point out just some key things that he does well that we looked at in the two other quarterbacks, and then just something about how your footwork can set you up to be in a spot to be able to transfer weight and get weight underneath your frame. Okay, so now you see when Wilson goes back, pretty much same deal, right? So weight's on that back leg. His back leg's clearly underneath his frame. He's transferring. You see how that front hip's coming through. Hips are leading the football, and look where his front hand stays, right? Front hand stays nice and tight to his frame. Transferring that weight gets to the front leg, and he stays nice and square on the release point with that hand up by his face. That's the spot that we want to get to, right? That's the perfect spot. It's a money-making spot. That's why so many quarterbacks have a ton of velocity at this level, because they can get to that spot where their lower half does it, their upper half stays, like, I don't want to say restricted, but it doesn't pull way out of there, okay? So now, Third tip to increase arm strength is you got to make sure that your feet set you up in the right position. So he's doing quick game footwork here, right? So he's just going left. So he's taking a step with the left, kind of like a punch step, then one step with the right leg, right? But I want you to see when he lands with that right leg, how light his front foot is. This is where we have to be on all of my drops. So when you guys take a 3-step drop and throw, when you guys take a shuffle drop, when you guys are doing a quick game drop like this, your front foot has to be extremely light. Because let's say Wilson, when he goes back and he goes on this drop and he gets super heavy with that front leg. Like he's not on the balls of his feet. He's on his whole foot. He gets super heavy. All his weight's on that back leg. When he hits that, or that front leg, excuse me, when he hits that back leg, he's going to have like 80% of his weight on the front foot. And then what's going to end up happening is he's not going to transfer. His legs are going to lock out and he's going to be making this a shoulder throw because that back foot's going to be trailing behind. So he does a really good job of being light on that front foot, being on those toes. And then when you land with that back foot, you want to land with your whole foot in the ground. Your whole foot gets down. You're absorbing that force on that back leg. You're catching yourself on that back leg and it's underneath your frame, and being light on the front foot, fellas, allows that right leg to be underneath your frame. Think of it like this. Think of it like you're standing on one leg and you got to jump and switch legs. If you guys jump and your foot is too outside of your frame, you have to fall back down on the foot that was up in the air because you won't be able to balance like that. So you got to make sure that you're catching yourself with that back leg and your front foot is nice and light. So you set yourself up in a position to where you can transfer your weight. And that weight transfer and combining that with a good upper half, like we talked about in the very beginning, is how we get more velocity on the throw. So the third tip, make sure that when you guys are going through any kind of drop, any kind of footwork, your front foot is nice and light, your back foot is heavy, it's absorbing the force, it's catching yourself, and your whole cleat is in the grass, so you can get to this spot to where I transfer that weight. It's just a weight shift. It's not a push. We're getting the weight from the back leg to the outside of my front leg because that's what allows your front hip to rotate through, and that's what allows those hips to go through the throw before the ball, and that always will give you torque. Let's watch the thing again, full speed one more time. Great job by Wilson being light on the front foot, transferring that weight, and then obviously staying square at that release point. All right, guys, we want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to leave those in the comments below. I always appreciate the feedback. You guys always appreciate the new video suggestions. It helps me come up with new ideas. So if you guys have any comments, any concerns, feel free to ask those below. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. And again, fellas, QB Arm Strength Bundle. All the specific things you need to do to improve your arm strength in only 4 weeks. All the exercises, tips, specific things that you can tie into your own game to improve your arm strength. Very first link in the description, fellas. I'll see you guys next time.